And we are back. Advocates for the children of New York have worked to ensure a high-quality education for New York students who face barriers to academic success. New York City Mayor Eric Adams appears to be backing down from his plans to reduce funding for schools because of declining enrollment after facing criticism for budget cuts to schools last summer. Joining us now is the Policy Director of Advocate for Children of New York, Randi Levine. And we thank you so much for joining us, Randi, and glad to have you sharing with us. And we'll start right there talking about the mayor and, him backing down. When you look at the budget and you look at where it's going right now, how do you feel that children are being affected by this new budget?
This year, the majority of schools saw reductions to their budgets based on declining enrollment. And this year, the city did invest $160 million in federal COVID-19 relief funding so that schools wouldn't see as significant of a reduction in their budgets as they otherwise would have, and also made some adjustments mid-year. The plan had been to further reduce that assistance for next year to only $80 million. So we're relieved that the city is not moving forward with that additional planned cut, but we know that school budgets were reduced this year, and that's a concern.
How much, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but talk to me about how much is COVID really playing a part of this? When we look at these numbers and the fact we talked about drastic numbers of enrollment, and then you're looking at drastic numbers in terms of being cut. How much can we attribute this to COVID and other factors?
I think that there are a number of reasons why we've seen declining enrollment over the past few years in our schools, but it is having an impact on budgets, which are largely driven by per pupil funding. We are also concerned that there are some specific targeted initiatives to help students that are only funded through June. And unfortunately, the mayor's preliminary budget does not extend funding for those programs. And so that's a real concern for us.
You mentioned programs, but you got to talk to us and tell us exactly what are those programs that you deem important that need to be extended past June.
So we're concerned about 4 programs that have city funding that is expiring in June. One of them is called the Mental Health Continuum, which is an interagency partnership to help students with significant mental health needs access expedited mental health care. You just talked about the impact of the pandemic. We have a youth mental health crisis right now. And so we need additional resources to help students with mental health needs, and certainly can't be cutting back on them at this time. Another program helps immigrant families to participate meaningfully in their children's education by ensuring that key information about the education system gets to them, that they can understand. This is a $4 million initiative, again, funded only until the end of this school year. And particularly at a time when we've seen an influx of additional immigrant families, we need more funding to help parents participate meaningfully and understand what's happening in their child's education, certainly not less. For children who are homeless, the city gets a lot of credit for launching a new program to place Department of Education coordinators in shelters to help students living there get to school every day and get the educational support they need. But that funding is also in jeopardy because it's only in place through the end of this school year. And then finally, the city recently announced the launch of a new program to provide early childhood education and care to children who are undocumented, who had previously been excluded from some of the city's early childhood education programming. So it's been exciting to see that initiative get off the ground, and we want to ensure that it can continue beyond this year.
Share with us some insight as far as teacher-student ratio. We know that there's a lot of high-needs schools out there. The question is, do we have an adequate enough amount of staff to really deal with some of these high-need schools?
There's definitely a need for additional staff. We often look at the ratio of social workers to students and see that we need more social workers in order to be supporting students. We see a need for additional bilingual teachers, especially at a time when we have additional students enrolling who need bilingual instruction. Special education providers. We see a number of areas where there are shortages that need to be addressed.
Yeah. I want to go back to the early childhood education and care for children who are undocumented. That is a huge number. We know that we've got a lot of undocumented students who are attending these schools, but yet and still the need for services continues to arise. Are you optimistic that we'll see this continue past June?
Well, every student in New York City has the right to be in school. We're really talking about some of the early childhood and childcare programs that have excluded children who are undocumented because of some federal eligibility criteria. We think that it is so important to ensure that the youngest children have access to early childhood education, regardless of their immigration status. And so we do hope that the mayor will include funding for that initiative as well as these other initiatives in his upcoming executive budget that will be released a couple months from now.
Yeah. So, have you had conversations with the mayor's office with regards to this? I know that you're upset, well, I should say disgruntled with the fact of what the budget looks like. But talk to us about the conversations with the mayor's office. What have you heard, and is there any possibility about revisiting?
We've been talking to the Department of Education, City Hall, as well as City Council, and we've heard a lot of support for these initiatives. So we definitely want to work with all players as the city budget process moves forward to ensure that funding is put back into the budget for next year and beyond. We don't want to have to play a budget dance every year where funding gets taken out and then we have to see, is it going to be put back or not? For the sake of these programs, and especially for the children and the families who benefit from these programs, it's such a better scenario to have long-term stable funding.
Yeah. As we get ready to wrap up, I want to ask you a question because you are the policy director. What policies should we be paying attention to in the year 2023 here in New York City?
Well, there are so many important education conversations that are happening right now. Certainly funding is a key one, and so I'm so glad that we're talking about it today. Both this year's budget as well as looking ahead to a point where we have a situation where many education initiatives are funded through one-time federal COVID-19 federal stimulus funding that is going to expire. And so we need to start thinking about how we're going to continue funding important initiatives that are helping children. Things like social workers, bilingual programs, support for students with dyslexia, and many more initiatives. Beyond looking at those specific funding issues, we have been encouraged that the mayor and the chancellor have talked a lot about the need to really transform the way that we teach reading in New York City. And we think the time is ripe to make those changes. Advocates for Children gets calls every year from families who are looking for more support for their children to learn to read and can't find it within the public school system. And there are many other examples from mental health needs, special education support, more support for English language learners, students in foster care, students who are homeless, and the list goes on. So there are many issues we'll be paying attention to in the coming months.
Well, Randi Levine, we thank you for being with us, and certainly great information being shared here, and certainly we'll continue to follow this here on Open. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. Well, for more information, you can visit their website at advocatesforchildren.org, and then follow them on Instagram and Twitter at AFC New York.